The tension inside the packed auditorium was impossible to ignore. Hours before the broadcast even began, crowds had already gathered outside, waving signs, chanting slogans, and arguing with complete strangers about what they believed was about to happen. Reporters filled every corner of the street while camera crews rushed from one live shot to another. Social media was already exploding with predictions, rumors, and speculation. Everyone knew that two of the biggest names in American politics were about to collide on the same stage, and nobody expected the night to end quietly. As the lights dimmed and the cameras rolled, a feeling spread through the room that something much larger than a television appearance was about to unfold. What began as a discussion about leadership quickly turned into a brutal battle over power, influence, credibility, and the future of American politics itself. Every word carried weight. Every glance seemed loaded with meaning. Every moment pushed the atmosphere closer to a breaking point. The audience could feel it. Millions watching from home could feel it. Even the commentators sitting backstage appeared nervous as the confrontation intensified. At the center of it all stood two completely different visions of America, each claiming to represent the truth while accusing the other of misleading the public. One side framed itself as the defender of stability, institutions, and democratic norms. The other presented itself as a movement determined to challenge a political establishment that many voters no longer trusted. What followed was not a simple disagreement. It was a collision of narratives that had been building for years. The discussion moved rapidly from leadership to accountability, from economic policy to media influence, from foreign affairs to questions of public trust. With every passing minute, the divide became more visible. Supporters cheered loudly whenever their side scored a point. Critics rolled their eyes and waited for an opportunity to strike back. The room transformed into a living representation of the political polarization gripping the nation. As accusations and counter-accusations filled the air, the focus shifted toward credibility. Questions emerged about promises made during campaigns, decisions taken while in office, and statements that had shaped public opinion for years. Old controversies resurfaced, past interviews were brought back into the spotlight, archived footage, forgotten remarks, and historical records suddenly became part of the conversation once again. What made the moment so powerful was not any single claim or accusation, but the growing realization that the public was witnessing a broader struggle over who controls the narrative. For years, political leaders, commentators, and media organizations had competed to shape public perception. Now those competing narratives were crashing into each other in front of a national audience. Every side insisted the facts were on their side. Every side claimed the other was hiding the truth. As the confrontation escalated, the audience became increasingly divided. Applause erupted from one side of the room while boos echoed from the other. Some spectators stood and cheered. Others sat silently with folded arms. The atmosphere grew more intense with each passing minute. Observers began comparing the event to a courtroom drama, a political convention, and a championship fight all at the same time. Yet beneath the spectacle was a deeper issue. The debate was no longer simply about individual personalities. It had become a referendum on trust itself. Trust in government, trust in institutions, trust in the media, trust in political leaders who promised change and claimed to speak for ordinary citizens. Every topic seemed to return to the same fundamental question: who was telling the truth and who was benefiting from confusion? The discussion moved toward foreign policy, where disagreements became even sharper. Critics argued that aggressive rhetoric had created unnecessary instability. Supporters responded that strength was essential in a dangerous world. Competing visions of diplomacy, military power, and international alliances clashed repeatedly. Neither side showed any willingness to retreat. Instead, both doubled down, presenting their arguments with increasing confidence. Meanwhile, the audience remained captivated. Viewers watching from home flooded social media with reactions. Clips from the event began spreading across platforms before the broadcast had even ended. Political commentators scrambled to interpret what they were seeing. Analysts searched for turning points. Strategists looked for moments that might influence public opinion. Yet the most memorable aspect of the night was not a single exchange. It was the overall feeling that the country was witnessing a symbolic struggle between two competing eras of American politics. One side argued that institutions must be preserved and strengthened. The other insisted that those same institutions had failed the people and required fundamental change. As the confrontation continued, references to past elections, policy decisions, media coverage, and public controversies created an increasingly complex picture. Years of political conflict seemed to converge into a single conversation. Every issue became connected to a larger debate about power and accountability. Supporters framed criticism as proof that entrenched interests felt threatened. Opponents argued that scrutiny was necessary because no public figure should be above questioning. The clash between those perspectives became one of the defining themes of the evening. By the time the final segment approached, it was clear that nobody would leave satisfied. Neither side was interested in compromise, neither side appeared willing to acknowledge weaknesses. Instead, both focused on reinforcing their own narratives while challenging the legitimacy of the other. The audience watched as competing versions of reality unfolded in real time. Facts, interpretations, memories, and political loyalties blended together into a dramatic confrontation that reflected the broader state of the nation. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, the arguments continued online, on television, and in conversations across the country. Supporters declared victory, critics claimed exposure, commentators produced endless analysis. Yet beneath all the noise, one reality remained impossible to ignore. The confrontation had revealed just how deeply divided the political landscape had become. It showed how difficult it had become for Americans to agree not only on solutions, but sometimes even on basic facts. It demonstrated the power of narrative in shaping public opinion and the growing influence of media personalities, political movements, and digital platforms. Most importantly, it reminded everyone watching that modern politics was no longer fought solely through legislation or elections. It was fought through stories, perceptions, and competing claims about what the country was and what it should become. The aftermath of the confrontation spread across the country with astonishing speed. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips flooded every major social media platform. Supporters rushed to declare victory, while critics insisted the event had exposed deeper problems than anyone expected. Television panels stayed on air late into the night, replaying key moments over and over again. Commentators dissected every expression, every pause, and every statement, searching for signs of weakness or strength. Yet what truly captured public attention was not a single exchange, but the growing realization that the political divide had reached a level few could have imagined just a decade earlier. What should have been a discussion about policy had evolved into a battle over identity, trust, and competing versions of reality. Across the nation, families argued at dinner tables, coworkers debated in break rooms, and friends clashed online. Everyone seemed to be talking about the same thing. The event became larger than the people on stage because it reflected frustrations that had been building for years. Economic uncertainty, political tribalism, distrust of institutions, and nonstop media warfare had created an environment where every controversy immediately became a national spectacle. The confrontation simply brought those tensions into the open. As analysts reviewed the evening, a pattern began to emerge. Many noted that modern political conflicts were no longer centered exclusively on legislation or governance. Instead, they revolved around narratives. Every side attempted to define the story before facts could fully settle. Every controversy became a race to control public perception. In this environment, image often moved faster than evidence, and emotional reactions frequently outweighed careful analysis. The showdown highlighted this reality in dramatic fashion. Millions of viewers had watched the same broadcast, yet reached completely different conclusions. Some saw proof of accountability, others saw evidence of political persecution. Some viewed sharp questioning as necessary scrutiny, others viewed it as an unfair attack. The divide was so deep that even shared events produced entirely separate interpretations. Political strategists understood exactly what this meant. They recognized that modern campaigns were no longer fought only during election season. The battle for public opinion had become permanent. Every speech, interview, rally, and television appearance represented another front in an ongoing conflict. Every viral clip had the potential to shape perceptions for weeks or months. The confrontation became a perfect example of this new reality. While supporters celebrated moments they believed demonstrated strength, opponents circulated clips they felt exposed contradictions. The same footage became ammunition for completely different arguments. Meanwhile, media organizations competed aggressively for attention. Headlines became increasingly dramatic. Commentary grew louder. Predictions became more extreme. Some outlets described the event as a defining moment for the political landscape. Others dismissed it as another chapter in an endless cycle of outrage. Yet despite those differences, one fact remained undeniable. Millions were watching, millions were engaged, and millions were choosing sides. The event also reignited debates about the role of public figures in shaping political discourse. For years, entertainers, commentators, and influencers had become increasingly involved in political conversations. Their platforms allowed them to reach audiences that traditional politicians sometimes struggled to access. As a result, political battles were no longer confined to campaign stages or government buildings. They played out across podcasts, television shows, streaming platforms, and social media feeds. The confrontation reflected this transformation perfectly. What once might have been considered a political disagreement had evolved into a media event capable of dominating the national conversation. As the days passed, additional footage, interviews, and reactions continued to surface. Former officials weighed in. Political consultants offered competing interpretations. Journalists investigated claims made during the discussion. Supporters organized online campaigns. Critics launched counter-campaigns. Every development fueled another round of debate. Yet beneath the noise, deeper questions remained unresolved. Why had trust in institutions declined so dramatically? Why had political identities become so central to personal identity? Why did so many citizens feel that compromise had become impossible? These questions extended far beyond any individual politician. They touched on fundamental issues affecting democratic societies around the world. The confrontation merely provided a highly visible example of broader trends. Experts pointed to growing polarization, fragmented media environments, and economic anxieties as major contributing factors. Technology had accelerated information sharing while also making it easier for misinformation to spread. Algorithms rewarded engagement, and outrage often generated more engagement than nuance. Political actors adapted accordingly. Messages became sharper. Language became more combative. Complex issues were reduced to simple narratives designed for maximum impact. The result was a political environment where conflict often overshadowed substance. Many observers believe the showdown captured that reality better than any policy paper ever could. Every moment reflected the incentives shaping modern politics. Dramatic exchanges attracted attention. Viral moments dominated coverage. Emotional reactions drove engagement. Meanwhile, careful discussions about long-term policy challenges struggled to compete. This imbalance frustrated some analysts who worried that political discourse was becoming increasingly performative. Yet others argued that conflict had always been part of politics and that public disagreement remained a healthy component of democracy. The debate over those questions continued long after the cameras stopped rolling. Polling data released in the following weeks revealed another interesting pattern. Public opinion remained remarkably stable despite the intensity of the confrontation. Most viewers interpreted events through existing political loyalties. Supporters generally remained supportive. Critics generally remained critical. This phenomenon highlighted the strength of partisan identities in contemporary politics. Information alone rarely changed minds. Instead, people tended to filter new developments through pre-existing beliefs. The showdown demonstrated this tendency with remarkable clarity. Even when viewers agreed on what happened, they often disagreed completely about what it meant. Political scientists found the situation fascinating. They argued that modern political behavior increasingly resembled cultural affiliation rather than traditional policy preference. Citizens often viewed political disagreements through the lens of group identity, making persuasion more difficult and polarization more durable. The confrontation became a case study in this phenomenon. Every statement seemed to reinforce existing divisions rather than bridge them. Yet despite the frustration many observers felt, there were also signs of continued public engagement. Millions remained interested in politics. Millions cared enough to watch, discuss, and debate. Participation remained high. While polarization posed serious challenges, civic interest itself had not disappeared. If anything, it had intensified. The challenge was finding ways to channel that energy constructively. As commentators reflected on the broader significance of the event, many returned to a central theme. The confrontation was never solely about the individuals involved. It represented competing visions of leadership, governance, accountability, and national identity. Those disagreements would continue regardless of who occupied political office. The personalities might change, but the underlying conflicts would remain. Questions about institutional trust, economic opportunity, media influence, and democratic norms would continue shaping public debate for years to come. The showdown simply concentrated those issues into a single, highly visible moment. Looking back, many observers concluded that the event revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of modern democracy. On one hand, citizens remained deeply engaged. Public debate remained vibrant, powerful figures continued facing scrutiny. On the other hand, polarization often made consensus difficult. Shared facts became harder to establish. Political incentives frequently rewarded confrontation over cooperation. These competing realities existed simultaneously, creating a political landscape defined by both energy and division. As the national conversation moved forward, the confrontation remained a reference point. Supporters cited it as evidence of courage and conviction. Critics cited it as proof of dysfunction and polarization. Historians, journalists, and political analysts continued examining its implications. Yet perhaps the most important lesson was simpler. The event demonstrated that politics had become inseparable from storytelling. Facts mattered, but narratives determined how those facts were interpreted. Leadership mattered, but perception influenced how leadership was judged. Policies mattered, but emotions often shaped public reactions more powerfully than technical details. Understanding modern politics required understanding all of these dynamics at once. The showdown offered a vivid illustration of that reality. Long after headlines faded and attention shifted elsewhere, the larger questions remained: how could democratic societies maintain trust during periods of rapid change? How could citizens distinguish between genuine accountability and political theater? How could institutions adapt to a media environment driven by speed, outrage, and constant competition for attention? These questions had no easy answers. They extended beyond any single controversy, personality, or election cycle, yet they remained central to the future of democratic governance. The confrontation reminded viewers that political battles are rarely just about individuals. They are often reflections of deeper tensions shaping society itself. And as the country continued grappling with those tensions, one thing became increasingly clear: the struggle over narrative, trust, and power was far from over. The stage lights had gone dark, the audience had gone home, and the cameras had stopped recording, but the larger conflict continued, unfolding every day across media platforms, political institutions, and public conversations throughout the nation.